Hi, welcome back to the Weekly Waypoint. Today we're playing Warframe, and I am new to Warframe, so it's going to be a little scuffed. My movement isn't necessarily going to be on par with the streamers that you might be used to watching. I'm going to cancel my bullet jumping, which is apparently what it's called, by accident sometimes, and I'm going to bash into walls and doors and rails. It's going to be entirely cringe. I am not a Warframer, but my friend is. One of my closest friends, Reese, has put 900 hours into the game in a year, and so I figured I should probably get around to checking this out. That's right, I'm calling you out. You're a nerd, Lamau. Don't look at my World of Warcraft hours, or my RuneScape hours, or my Elder Scrolls Online hours, or my Final Fantasy XIV hours, or my Guild Wars 2 hours. So back in the day, I was a Destiny 2 enjoyer back before they started deleting the content we bought. And there's been a Destiny 2 shaped hole in my life since the end of Shadowkeep, and, you know, this isn't necessarily going to fill it. It's a very different game. It's more Cyborg Ninja than it is Halo man in space with fantasy powers. But I am enjoying it so far. It's not my first time, but I've given this game a try. But yeah, this game feels... It's definitely one of those games that's been around so long that the new player experience is a little bit messy. Like, it throws kind of a dozen things at you and you're not entirely sure what order you should be looking at them in. And I wish... World of Warcraft has this problem as well. I wish they would just tell you what certain parts of a game are from which updates, because then I could go about approaching the game in my own way. That would allow players to be like, oh, okay, I want to see the newest stuff that the game's got to offer new players first, or I want to play the game, you know, as close to chronological order as they will allow. As it is, I'm having to rely on guides, and the game's like, I really want you to go and do this quest. This is the absolute most important next quest you should go and tackle. And I look it up and it's like, nah, that's like a tutorial for a system that you don't really need to do right away. Actually, what you need to do is go and do these nodes on this planet so that you can go and unlock the next main quest. And it's weird because you will have periods of gameplay where you're basically just given very basic bare bones story and told to go clean out these repeatable missions on nodes for like the main story path. And then you'll find somewhere like Fortuna, which is this straight up player hub with like so many NPCs with things to say and side quests, and you know, there's this open world area where you can go and do like dynamic events together with players, and it feels a lot more like a modern Destiny 2 adjacent game. And I feel like there's a lot of newer game stuff being built on the back of the old game bones. And when I'm doing what you're watching right now, which is clearing out the nodes across the planets, it does get a bit repetitive and boring sometimes. I know I could queue in to do this with random players and it would get done a lot faster, by the way, but also I would like to play the video game instead of just chasing people who have 1,000 hours in the game and are bullet jumping their way through the entire thing without stopping for a cup of tea and a biscuit on the side. But yeah, I'm having fun. It's a fun time. So far it's like a 6 or a 7 out of 10, and I've heard that the story gets really good, which is surprising because, like I've said, a lot of the story so far is very bare bones. It feels like not a lot has been explained to me, and you know, I would assume that there's not all that much going on, except I've heard so many things about, like, you've got to be careful of spoilers and people love this game for the story and everything, and it's just interesting because I've yet to see any of that for myself. There are some ideas here which are really unique and cool, like the design of the Grineer and Warframes in general, and what's going on with the moon of Deimos, and the entire story with corporations and stuff on Fortuna. I really liked that. Again, though, that felt more like you know, something that might have been added later, you know, to an early point in the story, or at the very least had more effort put into it than a lot of this go-do nodes part of the story has. And I can see the potential for becoming super invested in this game later down the line. Like I told my friend, this game has a lot of spreadsheet potential with all of the different warframes and the different guns and weapons and stuff, and how they all have their own level up system, and then you've got the mod system to like change their damage or like increase their, you know, rate of fire and so on and so forth. I'm also still a little bit wary because I know that this game is monetized in the way of like you either grind or you pay, and that has the potential to be pretty bad at endgame, but I have heard good things about how they treat their player base, so I'm not too worried about it. But yes, so far it is a fun time. It's not something that I'm necessarily like itching for more of just yet, but who knows, tune in this time next week and maybe it'll be a whole different story. In other news this week, I picked up Spelunky 2. You may recall that last week's episode we were playing Spelunky 1. Well, since then Spelunky 2 went on sale for £5 and I realised I could get it on Steam. I also put out an episode of a roguelike ramble for the first time in a couple years, so if you're interested in watching me do some live commentary while I play a game, you can watch me struggle with Spelunky 2 and die in a lot of very silly and embarrassing ways. I've been getting back into those sorts of live gameplay commentary long-form content videos in general this week because I also put out the first part of a Crash Bandicoot 2 Let's Play, which I've not checked the views for yet, and I'm assuming probably isn't doing too good because platformers don't tend to on my channel, but I do this for fun, damn it, and I wanted to play some gosh dang Crash Bandicoot 2, so go check that out if that is something that you feel like would appeal to you. In my original take on the commentary of this episode of A Weekly Waypoint, which I am now redoing, I did get launched into a bit of a tirade about the YouTube algorithm and how annoying it is that I can't do two different types of gameplay on a single channel, because I can't just keep spinning up multiple damn channels. But my Lord of the Rings Online video is doing real well for me, and that's great, except I also want to play Crash Bandicoot 2 and not have YouTube punish me for not continuing to play Lord of the Rings Online, you know. But hey-oh, what are you gonna do? 'Tis the system we all live in, and I am choosing not to conform to it, and therefore I suppose I must deal with the ramifications of not conforming to it. But yes, I have been playing a little bit more of Lord of the Rings Online. I've definitely slowed down, and I wish to give it more of my attention, if I'm being honest. Maybe I should knuckle down and try and get some time in before the next World of Warcraft update comes out, because that's going to be player housing, and that is going to eat up a lot of my time. 10. No, hang on, what expansion are we on? 11.2.7 is coming out early December, and not only does it bring all the player housing related stuff with it, but it also has some other updates which look pretty exciting, such as a prologue story for the next expansion, and, you know, Shadowlands time walking, surprisingly, and I do quite like those dungeons. I didn't spend enough time in those dungeons, and yeah, just a bunch of stuff that's going to make me probably play some more WoW. Lore walking quests related to Blood Elves and Void Elves, and there's a whole new player and returning player experience overhaul, which isn't necessarily something that I'm outright looking forward to because it doesn't really, you know, it doesn't hold context for me, but I think it is very good and healthy for the game. Speaking of good and healthy updates for MMOs I play, RuneScape just passed a poll in which they are removing Treasure Hunter from the game of RuneScape 3, which is huge. If you do not play RuneScape, basically, many years ago, they introduced a system called Treasure Hunter, which is a kind of a loot box system, and it allows you to directly buy XP and, you know, insane perk items and stuff, and it basically ruined the integrity of the game. It turned a beloved MMO into like a pay-to-win mobile game. Many of us persevered with enjoying RuneScape in the meantime by making like Iron Man accounts where you're taken out of the ability to buy those kinds of microtransactions and the player economy in general, so everything is self-perpetuated. It's almost like a single-player version of a game within live servers. But yes, they're finally getting rid of Treasure Hunter, which I think the entire industry could take note of, because it is one of the earliest instances I've ever seen in the industry of a company recognizing that, yes, what we're doing right now is making us money, and the steps that we would have to take to get rid of it will make us less money. However, it is also going to destroy the game and kill all sources of income for us if we do not do something about it. So they've spent the last few months experimenting with different types of, like, would you buy more cosmetics if we put more cosmetics on the store and disable Treasure Hunter and stuff like that. And they finally put up a poll, and I think it got like 115 votes. I was definitely one of those votes saying, yes, get rid of Treasure Hunter, and it passed, and they're removing it early next year, which is crazy. They are still allowing players to directly buy limited quantities of bonus XP because during their polling and their surveys and stuff, they found out that there was a portion of the player base who relied on the ability to buy XP because they didn't have enough time to play the game in their spare lives and stuff. Still don't know if I agree with allowing that to happen, but hey, it's much, much, much better than having Treasure Hunter. And they have recognized that they need to overhaul the design of the entire game to kind of be more accommodating to player time, and that's why those players still feel like they would be served being able to buy bonus XP. It's a whole thing, honestly, it's fascinating. even if you don't play RuneScape or know anything about it, if you like MMOs as a genre, I think it's probably a fascinating thing to go and read up on. But I was starting to get to a point where I was like, you know, it's obvious that they want to remove Treasure Hunter. They're probably going to do it, right? But, you know, they're very much, like, they made a whole animation about it. Like, they're giving it the full PR treatment, and that started to make me just a little bit, like, cynical about it. I was starting to get a bit cynical about it. Because while removing Treasure Hunter will be a obvious, huge positive step for the game, there are games out there which do not sell player power, and are still egregious with their microtransactions, such as Diablo 4, right? It's not all going to be sunshine and roses if they swap to mostly cosmetic microtransactions, because they could still be shoving it down our throats at every opportunity. We do still need to see how the future of the game will go, but they also then announced a slew of updates for the game beginning next year, actually beginning right now, beginning today as of the time of recording, this Monday, where they're basically like, they're not just fixing the game in terms of Treasure Hunter, they're looking to fix the game in terms of everything. They're doing an overworld pass of looking at all of the updates that have put things in the world which don't conform with the kind of like language of the world, if you know what I mean, when you're running around it, what you would expect to see in this kind of fantasy universe. And yeah, if you run around RuneScape 3, there are eyesores. One of the examples they gave, which is a really good example, is when you run up to the south gate of Falador, you've got this giant armadillion floating structure because it's part of some quest. But it doesn't look like it belongs in the world or is supposed to be there really, for more than maybe like the small amount of time in which it is there for the quest in you know, lore. I've not actually done that quest, so excuse me if I got that wrong, but yeah, it's an eyesore, and it's like next to a whole bunch of like clan stuff as well, which is like a bunch of flags in a circle and like a portal in the middle of it and stuff, and it just, the world is full of this kind of stuff, and they're going to go through and clean it up and make sure that while you still need to be able to access those places and stuff, maybe it'll be less obtrusive. And they've started with Lumbridge, and they've replaced the old Lumbridge crater with what used to be there before they did that whole thing, and they've replaced the Lumbridge castle walls, and they've removed a bunch of like NPCs which were put in the game for like very specific events or updates and stuff, and they've just made it look fresh again. And that makes my heart so happy. We don't need constant reminders of updates that were important like 10-15 years ago in the game world. We can have the game world be like a representation of Gielinor, which you would actually expect to see if you were there, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's exciting. I'm really glad that they're doing that, and that just kind of like is an indication of their philosophy in general regarding RuneScape 3. They haven't announced like the entire roadmap of what they're doing in that regard, but it really feels like RuneScape 3 is trying to clean up its act in every way imaginable. And one of my favourite things is I saw a player on the RuneScape 3 subreddit and say like, this is great, but is this not going to take time away from active development of like, you know, new content and expansionary material and stuff like that? And the devs were like, actually no, this is a separate team doing all this. Basically, because we don't have to spend so long working on like Treasure Hunter promotions, we can do this instead with our time. And like, that's amazing. So yeah, I have my issues with Mod North, but there is no denying that he is good for the game's health in terms of like, you know, taking out all of the stuff that everyone hates about RuneScape 3 and trying to make it an actual respectable game. Here's hoping that this time next summer, however, he can discover and realize and learn that cancelling an in-development Pride event for RuneScape is not an act of neutrality, it's actively damaging to a portion of the player base who play the game. But that's a whole other discussion. Now for the last thing that I would like to talk about today, we are going to shift to my current hyperfixation, which has been lasting a long time now. We're going to be talking about comics, but we're not going to be talking about comic books themselves. I've got a whole channel for that, it's called Kritigri Talk Stories. I want to talk about the DC animated universe and Disney shows in general. Because one of my friends made a post on Blue Sky today, which led me down an entire rabbit hole, where they talked about the fact that a lot of people complain about things not being available on streaming services. And they mentioned like, you know, you can just go and physically buy media yourself, right? You don't have to rely on streaming services to, you know, put things that you want on them. And I was like, oh yeah, I should go and look into that. Because here in the UK, DC are notorious for not having their shows on streaming services. And so I've been looking up you know, their animated shows and movies and stuff like that as Blu-ray box sets, and I've been discovering things and formulating a wish list. And by the way, this is something I've been wondering about in general, Oh my god, I forgot to warn you at the start of this video, but I had trouble with this boss, and I still don't entirely know why they were undamageable for so long. But yeah, I've been wondering about Kritigri Talk stories, like, is it a weird idea to make a wishlist video, because I'm still pretty new to the hobby of physically collecting comics and stuff. When I say a wishlist video, it's not, hi, please donate to my cause so I can buy nice things for myself. It's things that I'm looking into getting for myself in the future. There is no way to donate to a cause, do not worry. So yeah, I've been looking into Blu-rays, and as it turns out, DC are pretty good on the Blu-ray front. Because I've always wanted to get into the DC Animated Universe movies, but you know, they're not streaming anywhere, and picking them up individually would end up costing quite a lot. But there are box sets, and there are 2 box sets, and I'm not sure which one I would rather go for. The first one is an 80th anniversary of Batman box set, which includes the movies Batman Gotham Knight, Year 1, Under the Red Hood, Bad Blood, Batman vs. Robin, Son of Batman, Batman The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, Assault on Arkham, The Killing Joke, Batman and Harley Quinn, Gotham by Gaslight, Ninja, Return of the Caped Crusaders, Mask of the Phantasm, Mystery of the Batwoman, Batman Superman Public Enemies, Superman Batman Public Enemies, and Superman Batman Apocalypse. And I'm very curious about all of those movies. And that's like £46. And I think that's actually pretty decent value for £46. You consider the amount of content that amount of money would get you in gaming or in comic book collecting, and I would say it's pretty on par. And obviously if you were to try and get those movies separately, it would probably be like £180. They're like £10 each usually, right? There's also a DC Animated Universe 10th Anniversary collection, which is supposed to include 30 movies and is on sale for £70, which sounds like incredible value. But according to the reviews, Amazon are just straight up lying and there's only 19 movies included, but nobody seems to be stating which ones. So... There's also the DC Animated Universe Collection Volume 1 for £50, which contains just 5 movies, which isn't exactly any more value than just getting the movies separately. I hope you're enjoying this edition of Christian Goes Window Shopping Live. I should probably get the Batman one, shouldn't I? And then I should probably just pick up the other ones here and there, every now and again, individually. £10 for like an hour-and-a-half long movie, though. I don't know. I've never loved the value proposition of movies in that way. That's why I don't really have any DVDs from back before the Blu-ray era was a thing. But I'll tell you what is better value proposition, and that's the series box sets, baby. So firstly, there's Batman the Animated Series, all 4 seasons for £51. The thing is, that is available on Netflix right now, and I've been trying to watch through it, but because I didn't watch it as a kid, while it is fun, it doesn't necessarily keep my attention. However, Blu-rays do come with all these extras, which could be pretty fun to look at. And the main reason I want to watch Batman the Animated Series is because it's kind of a springboard for all of these other animated series which take place in the same universe, such as Superman and Justice League and Batman Beyond, which all have their own Blu-ray box sets. However, some of the box sets which interest me the most are The Batman, the complete series, which is the second animated series, which is the one I grew up with, and that's £44 for 4 seasons. That seems to be about the general value proposition here. And again, if you compare that to like the amount of hours you of like story content versus the amount of hours of story content you get in other mediums, it's about on par. And then there's Teen Titans as well. I did search, looking outside of like DC stuff, I did search for like a Shaolin Showdown Blu-ray box set. Apparently that does not exist. But yeah, these original animated series box sets hold a little bit more value proposition for me as well, because while I really want to see these movies, these animated universe movies, most of them are based on existing comic storylines, and you know, a lot of them I haven't read yet, and I would prefer to read the original material before I watch the movies. And also I know that in some cases, such as The Killing Joke, they straight up change a bunch of things that happened in the source material for the worse. But you know, there have been times when I've been walking through stores back when they like sold physical media, and like I've seen like Batman Ninja or Batman Mask of a Phantasm being sold, and I've been like, huh, what is going on with that? It doesn't just have to be limited to like DC stuff, of course, as I mentioned with Shaolin Showdown not existing, but you know, when it comes to like Marvel, we've got Disney Plus, and I'm less incentivized to pick up something physically when obviously I can just watch it on a streaming services that I already have. But yeah, as I've already mentioned, here in the UK, DC are awful for making their shows available. I did look into like getting the CW version of The Flash, that like 9 series show. That's like £100 on Blu-ray because of the amount of content inside, and ooh, Ooh, I don't know about that one, fam. I know in America and stuff you have, like, apparently there was, I don't know if it's still going, but DC Universe was a thing, which wasn't just for comics, but it was for, like, their own shows and movies and stuff. I would absolutely subscribe to a DC, like, tier for DC Universe Infinite, which also included the shows and the movies. And then apparently there's a bunch of stuff on HBO Max. We don't have HBO Max in the UK. And yeah, I could get a VPN, but also I don't want to have to pay a subscription fee just so I can pay a subscription fee. So yeah, these are all the sorts of thoughts which are in the back of my head every time I ever think about the DC animated stuff. It's frustrating living in the UK and being a fan of DC animated stuff. I might have to bite the bullet on that 18 movie collection though for Batman, because that's really cool. But yeah, collect physical media. Don't let corporations decide when you get to watch stuff. Or you could always do the other thing, I suppose, but that's apparently very complicated these days and requires a VPN anyway, so what's the point? Also, just as an aside, streaming services are just utter shit nowadays for if you want to watch like a whole series of like movies. Like, I was just searching stuff up on Netflix and they have Blade 2. They don't have Blade 1, but they have Blade 2. RoboCop is leaving soon, in the UK at least. Do they have the sequels to RoboCop? No, they sure don't, but if you want to watch just one of the RoboCop movies, they're here for you. All the other stuff will be distributed on other platforms, I'm sure. Anyway, that's been my rant. Thank you so much for checking this video out. Leave a like if you liked it, and I will catch you in whatever I make next. Might be more Warframe.